this is Dancing Rabbit. Welcome to another Saturday Pagan Perspective. As most of you know, Cute Witch is going on a school trip to the UK this month and part of next, and so she sent all of us the topics for April and May in one personal message. So it's a beautiful day here in Houston. I feel like it. I got the time. I decided to try to make all of the videos in one afternoon. Just wanted you to know that so you understand that I do own more than one clean shirt. Just not making costume changes between videos. Okay, on to the first week's question, April 2nd through 7th. First question. I'm very young, 15, and I'm a very devoted pagan. My parents are not so supportive though. How do I deal with this? Two things right off the top. First thing, I really like the way you phrase that question. You say, how do I deal with this? You don't ask, how do I get my parents to accept my spiritual path? But you ask, how do I deal with this? So you've taken the first big step. You understand that you really cannot make your parents change their minds or change the way they feel about paganism. But what you can do is change the way that you deal with it. Second thing, although you say, my parents are not so supportive, fortunately you don't say, my parents are actively hostile to my paganism. So it could be worse. So how do you deal with it? Well, these are a few of my suggestions. Focus on the practical and the ethical aspects of paganism rather than focusing so much on the mythological and ritual aspects of paganism, because those are the parts of paganism that people think are kind of weird and spooky and scary and so forth. Paganism is at its core a nature religion. It has to do with bringing yourself in harmony with nature. And there's also the wonderful idea that we humans are not separate from nature. We're part of the web of nature. So it's not just going out and hugging the trees, but it's also learning how to live in harmony with other people. For example, your parents. I believe that paganism is a way to become responsible. If you look at the Wiccan Rede and the threefold law, at the core of it is taking responsibility for your own actions. We pagans can't say, the devil made me do it. We pagans can't say, Jesus died for all of my foul-ups and he'll take the blame for it and so I don't have to. No, we honor our gods through our actions, and we take responsibility for our words and actions. So when you make a mistake, you don't go pray to the goddess for forgiveness. You may go to that person and apologize. Say, I'm sorry. I made a mistake. I shouldn't have said that. I shouldn't have done that. And if it's possible, maybe you said it right. You don't just say, sorry, but you also fix the thing that you broke. Let your parents see that you're taking responsibility for yourself. I cannot imagine that they would object to that. And if over time they begin to realize that you are doing this, not in spite of, but actually because of your spiritual path, their attitude toward it may change. There are small things that you can do. For example, Witch Miner, Mark, got a copy of my book, I think last year, maybe a year and a half ago, and one of the first things he did was the sacred space ritual, cleaning your room. I'd suggest you do that during the waning moon or during new moon. This is something you could do once a month. But anyway, what he did is he cleaned up his room. It wasn't horrible, but it was a little cluttered, a little messy, and he spent some time, probably an hour or so, cleaning his room. He even cleaned under the bed and in the closet, which, I didn't even say you had to do. Now, he felt like his parents would not approve of him lighting candles, setting up an altar, burning incense, and doing a full-blown ritual. So what he did as the spiritual end of this creating sacred space thing is he opened his windows and let the fresh, rather cold winter air in, and visualized the goddess and the god coming in and cleansing and blessing and making his room a sacred space. And, you know, is this something that your parents are going to get mad at you about because you cleaned your room? I'm not saying you have to be a neat freak, but what if you started cleaning your room, say, once a month? And whether you make it into a full-blown circle casting ritual or a more informal ritual, you are doing ritual work because you've planned this thing out and you're doing it for a spiritual purpose. You're 15. Your main job right now is going to school and learning stuff. Take responsibility for that. Everything is part of nature. So when you're doing science, you're doing paganism. Really, you're learning about the natural world and how the web of all creation fits together. If you're doing history, you're learning about the past, about ancient people, about how people related to one another. You're learning paganism. So get really serious about your studies. Take responsibility for your actions. Recycle. Make your bed. Wash or put up your own clothes. Mow the yard without being told or asked to do that. I mean, there's all kind of things you can do, and you could do them because you got to do them. Or you could do them for the goddess as an act of worship. And I think at some point your parents are going to mellow a little bit on this. Okay, second question. How do you deal with losing the people you love, like friends or family members, because they figure out about your path? Thanks. Well, how do I deal with it? It hasn't really happened all that much because I tend to practice the bottom of the witch's pyramid. The witch's pyramid is a tetrahedron, a sort of a triangle-based triangle. So it's got 4 sides to it, and the 4th side is to keep silent. I'm pretty much out of the closet, but I've never been out of the closet at work. There's just no point in it. So the various jobs that I've had, the people at work pretty much had no clue that I was a pagan author, that I was pagan, that I was anything except a nice person. What if you've already sort of let the cat out of the bag, or we're talking about somebody who is close enough to you that they're going to know this stuff? Well, let me give you an example of my mother and father. Now, I never came out to them as a pagan. However, I did come out to them as a Unitarian Universalist, which is also true. The way my father reacted is he did some library research into Unitarians, the history of our religion, and let me know that he'd done that, and he asked me if I believed that Jesus was the Son of God, and I answered him truthfully, no. I see Jesus as one of many good teachers who taught a lot of good and ethical things and set an example, but I don't consider him deity. And his response was, well, I do. And that was the end of the conversation. He wasn't interested in telling me why he believed Jesus was divine. He wasn't interested in finding out why I didn't. He just wanted to make sure he knew where I stood and I knew where he stood. My mother, as my parents both became terminally ill, they both became much more religious than I remember them ever being. And I think this is probably a natural sort of thing. And my mother was very concerned that since I was not a professing Christian, that when she died she would never see me again. and she asked me several times, very tearfully, to become a Christian, to accept Jesus as my Savior. And on the advice of my Unitarian minister, I didn't just go along with it and pretend to make her happy. I was honest and said, no, Mom, I can't honestly say that I believe that, and I'm sorry that you feel the way that you do. It was really, really hard to be asked that way. I think it was probably unfair of her to put that kind of pressure on somebody to make a religious decision, but I understand. I think that probably if these are friends, that if they're going to dump you because they find out that you're a pagan and that means that you're a devil worshiper, perhaps they weren't really your friends. They weren't really the kind of friends you thought they were. So maybe you should just let them go. I think that if they really are your friends, at some point they will come back to you. They will see that you don't really believe the right stuff, but you're not a horrible person, and they still want to be your friend. Loved ones, you can choose your friends, but you're kind of stuck with your family. So I don't know. It's you could use some of the same kind of stuff that I suggested in the first question, so that they get to know you all over again and realize that your paganism is not an actively evil thing, that it's actually a pretty good thing. And they may perhaps, if they're not absolute fundamentalists, they may perhaps mellow a little bit on this, or maybe not. It's a really unpleasant situation. It's a really sad situation sometimes, but you do what you can, and you let the chips fall where they may. So I see I've gone almost 13 minutes, so it's way past time for me to stop and get on to the next video. So till next week, this is Dancing Rabbit, wishing you and yours peace.